Hey guys, it's Amanda and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is essentially discourse about discourse. I'm going to be talking about Euphoria and its meta-narrative. First, analyzing the actual employment of meta-narrative as a storytelling device in the show, and then a bit of the juicy part, exploring how Euphoria discourse has morphed into a literal meta-narrative, which in and of itself has become a genre of content on TikTok, Twitter, and the like. Discourse on these apps can feel draining and unnuanced, and sometimes you want to break from all that, which is why today's video is sponsored by Quilt. Quilt is a free social network focused on self-care. It's an audio-only platform where you can have live, supportive conversations about topics ranging from building community and navigating friendships to creativity and music. Quilt rejects doom scrolling and focuses on real connections with real people so everyone feels validated, appreciated, and heard. It's a great place to go when you're feeling scroll fatigue or need a break from other social media platforms. I'll be joining a Quilt conversation on Monday, March 21st called Radical Living by Alex Brennan Arnapol. I'm super excited to learn more about their self-exploration journey with living off the grid and how they've reframed their relationship with technology. Future me popping in to say that since filming this video, I've joined a self-guided meditation quilt all about self-love, and it was a great way to start my day. You can join the conversation by downloading Quilt with the link in the description, going to the calendar section, and favoriting it so you don't miss out. Now back to the meta-narrative. Meta-narrative is defined as a narrative account that experiments with or explores with the idea of storytelling, often by drawing attention to its own artificiality. So I figured a good place to start with this video is a brief history of meta-ness itself, the breaking of the fourth wall. The fourth wall refers to the performance convention in which an invisible, imagined wall separates actors from the audience. While the audience can see through this wall, the convention assumes the actors act as if they cannot. In theater, the fourth wall has been broken even before Shakespeare's famous soliloquies. Asides date back to classical ancient Greek plays, and in 1758, philosopher Denis Diderot officially coined the convention. In theater, when a scene is set indoors and 3 of the walls of its room are presented on stage in what is known as a box set, the 4th of them would run along the line, technically called the proscenium, dividing the room from the auditorium. In film, breaking the fourth wall dates back to 1918, and the convention has been employed over the years primarily for comedic relief. There's even a whole genre that rests on the notion that the fourth wall is meant to be broken, the mockumentary, which we've seen with shows like The Office and Parks and Rec. So the fourth wall is really just an imaginary line, but it's a powerful one that separates performers from the audience, allowing us to suspend our disbelief and become immersed in a fictional world. Unless, of course, it is broken, and in the fictional world of Euphoriaville or East Highland, the fourth wall often has a gaping hole because it's narrated by a character who speaks directly to the audience. The highly stylized show follows a group of high schoolers plagued by the perils of addiction, social media, and tumultuous familial relationships, aka daddy issues. All this is narrated by the completely reliable, always lucid, not at all biased main character, Rue Bennett. Despite being high half the time she's on screen, when narrating, Rue is acutely aware of her audience. In the first episode of the series, Rue starts by telling us her life story. She was born 3 days after 9/11, grew up in a nondescript suburb, and has a brain that's predisposed to abnormal patterns of thinking. She tells us about her bout of OCD, panic attacks, and the fact that she can't remember anything about her life between the ages of 8 and 12 years old. We come to the conclusion that her mental disorders and her father's premature death have left Rue no choice but to turn to drugs for solace. They help her feel something and nothing all at once, while further compromising her credibility and exacerbating her case of unreliable narrator syndrome. At the start of the series, Rue's narration reads like the diary entry of an angsty teen because, well, that's exactly who she is. It's mostly harmless, maybe a tad melodramatic, And although she's somewhat of an outsider, Rue is our only actual in to the world of East Highland High and its students, so we ignore her lapses in judgment and take her words at face value. We don't question how she knows each character's origin story despite having virtually no relationship with some of them, or how she swept into a flash mobbish musical performance after relapsing at the end of season 1. Rue's drug-tainted perspective also affords us some of the most iconic and interesting cinematography that is emblematic of Euphoria.
Now, there's a couple versions of what happened that night. It all depends on who you ask, and to be honest, I'm not always the most reliable narrator.
Her partially true narration virtually has no consequences until the special episode between seasons 1 and 2. It becomes increasingly clear that just because she's the only raconteur, Rue shouldn't necessarily be trusted as a narrator.
We talked about getting matching tattoos on the inside of our lips.
Did you?
No.
Especially since in Jules' special episode, we're able to hear her side of the story. We enter season 2 more aware than ever of Rue's flaws as a narrator, and of course her fatal flaw, addiction. In the first episode, she overdoses and nearly dies. But as the season continues, Rue's perspective, while high, isn't represented through hyperreal visuals and spinning rooms, but a lack of her presence, both in plot and narration. This season, we see a lot more of Cal, Nate, Cassie, and Lexi. In an interview for Entertainment Weekly, Zendaya noted that the shift in focus can be partly attributed to Rue's drug addiction, which has distorted her view of reality. So while Sam Levinson wanted to highlight other stories, she said, it's kind of also Rue as an unreliable narrator in the sense that she's just trying to skate by without people noticing that she's doing what she's doing and trying not to get caught. When Rue slides out of the spotlight, we, the audience, are tasked with interpreting scenes from a third-person perspective until we find ourselves in the hands of a new narrator, Lexi. Lexi Howard is Cassie's younger sister and Rue's level-headed childhood friend who tries her best to support Rue through her struggles. She spent most of her life on the sideline, constantly overlooked because of her beautiful sister and living in the shadow of her parents' substance abuse issues. In season 1, her main role is as an emotional support character. In the first episode of the series, she gives her pee to a strung-out Rue so she can pass a sobriety test, and in the finale, she accompanies Cassie to her appointment at an abortion clinic. I always resonated with Lexi's character the most because out of all the high schoolers in the show, she seemed to be the most normal. She wasn't wearing red carpet-worthy makeup to homeroom or a harness to AP Calculus. Every cast of high school characters needs an observant wallflower, and in season 1, she fulfilled that role. However, by season 2, Lexi realizes that waiting in the wings of her own life is no way to live, and decides to take center stage by writing, directing, and starring in her own play. While her timid, standoffish nature was once seen as a weakness, Lexi realizes that it's actually her secret weapon. All those moments she existed in but wasn't truly a part of are content, and her unique experience as a fly on the wall is what makes them even more interesting. When Rue tells us Lexi's thought process leading up to the creation of the play, we're interrupted by one of the most meta scenes in Euphoria yet, a behind-the-scenes look at Lexi's fictional TV show, This Is Life.
Well, the story is about a 16-year-old girl. The story is about a 16-year-old girl, Grace, who lives in the shadow of her older sister, Hallie. But the story isn't about Hallie. You know, that's been done before. It's about Grace.
When watching this episode, I was very pleasantly surprised by the scene because it's such an anomaly compared to how Euphoria has previously employed meta-narrative through voiceover. Instead of just switching to a Lexi voiceover to convey her point of view, the medium of the meta-narrative, a behind-the-scenes TV show about a character's fantasy TV show, aligned itself with what Lexi wants to be, a writer. This scene gives a glimpse into her mind, and as the season progresses, Lexi's play, Our Life, marks the rare moments in the show that Rue gets to sit back and be a part of the audience. Lexi's highly anticipated play opens in the penultimate episode of season 2. The episode traverses between the present and the past as the play depicts significant events and relationships from Lexi's perspective. Rue's father's wake and her descent into drugs, Cassie going through puberty, Rue and Lexi's friendship, Lexi's relationship with her father, Cassie and Maddie's friendship, and Maddie's relationship with Nate. Our Life is a technical feat, from the casting of doppelgangers, a spinning stage, costumes with impeccable accuracy, and a musical number with an apparently Broadway-sized budget. It's extremely impressive that Lexi has managed to pull all this off for her first ever play. And while Our Life felt interesting when first watching, upon farther reflection, I couldn't help but wonder, was it all style over substance? Our Life is a meta-narrative. It's meant to be a pastiche of previous episodes of Euphoria, but it falls flat in its parody because it's exactly like the previous episodes of Euphoria. The one time the play does use parody pretty effectively is casting Ethan as Susie Howard. But the most interesting part of Our Life, save for the homoerotic dance number, is how the real characters that the play is based on react to the performance. When Maddie asks,
"Is this fucking play about us?"
or Nate storms out, and of course, when Cassie crashes the whole production. The whole point of the play was to ask, what would happen if the side character became the protagonist? The answer, well, nothing. When recounting previous events, Lexi's point of view doesn't seem that far off from the original moments. In fact, they're nearly indistinguishable. This could be interpreted as a testament to Lexi's dogged loyalty to accuracy, which is a technical triumph, but more than anything, an artistic letdown. It feels like a missed opportunity to show us a new perspective in the world of Euphoria. Based on how Lexi writes the moments in her play, it seems like she created the production based on the TV show Euphoria instead of her own lived experience. I actually think it could have been pretty interesting if Our Life didn't use East Highland's theater budget for the foreseeable future, because we'd get a chance to see how Euphoria holds up through an unstylized lens, and maybe that would reveal to us that the show looks so glamorous because it's how the characters think of themselves, but it's not actually how they are perceived by those outside their immediate circle. The problem with the play is that its attempt at being meta was simply redundant. We don't learn anything new about the scenes that have already been shown, and the new ones, like Rue's father's wake, don't seem to progress the story. But who is to blame? Lexi, the amateur writer, or the writer of Euphoria himself, Sam Levinson? Lexi's vision is ultimately reduced to a Euphoria-style supercut of Euphoria. Of course, Levinson's point of view is ingrained in each character, as he is the creator of the show and infamously runs a one-man writer's room. This method has mostly worked when writing from Rue's point of view, but Lexi's perspective seems to be overshadowed by Levinson's heavy hand. Ryan Doherty of Paste magazine put it like this: Euphoria isn't a show anymore. It's one man talking to himself dozens of times over, insisting to himself that he's doing a good job. It's there in the vibrant characters becoming voiceless in an undefined background. It's there in the long scenes of dialogue washed clean of all power. It's there in a writer writing her version of Euphoria for the characters of Euphoria, who all reflect that, wow, Euphoria sure is wild, and all the audience members laugh and cheer for the play because they too, of course, love Euphoria. And somewhere along the way, in this hall of self-aggrandizing mirrors, I find myself lost. This brings me to Sam Levinson. I can't think of a TV writer that's been simultaneously revered, hated, or talked about in the past few years. Usually when people air their grievances with a TV show, they voice their complaints to the faceless writers of blank, whether it's Game of Thrones or Riverdale. They don't know exactly who they're talking to because most shows have multiple writers. However, it's hard to miss that Levinson's name stays on the screen for about 5 seconds straight when the first few credits roll at the end of an episode of Euphoria. Euphoria is created by, directed by, written by, and executive produced by one dude. Actually, there are a handful of other executive producers, including Zendaya, Drake, and Levinson's wife, Ashley, but it's clear that this show is the product of an auteur, a filmmaker whose personal influence and artistic control over a movie are so great that the filmmaker is regarded as the author of the movie, or in this case, the TV show. But therein lies several people's problem with Levinson and Euphoria. there's no writer's room. Fans and critics of the show have begged and pleaded with Levinson to please hire a writer's room with women and people of color and queer people, because that's who Euphoria is about. But the sole writer, Sam Levinson, is a straight white male. Of course, you don't necessarily need to be the same gender, race, or sexuality as a character to write for or relate to them, but those social identities play a key role in how individuals navigate through the world, so it sure does help. There's a fine line to balancing this when writing, because on one hand, it can feel overbearing when a character is defined by their race or sexuality, but it can seem unrealistic and out of touch if those factors seem to have no implications on their life. In Euphoria, Levinson can't draw on personal experience when it comes to some components of his character's identity, like race, but also when writing for Rue, Levinson is able to draw inspiration from his experiences as a young drug addict. At the season 1 premiere of Euphoria, Levinson said, "I spent the majority of my teenage years in and out of hospitals, rehabs, and halfway houses. I was a drug addict, and I'd take anything and everything until I couldn't hear or breathe or feel." Although Levinson is one of the only credited writers of Euphoria, he and the cast of the show are very open about the fact that he works with actors to make their lived experiences and social identities a part of their characters. When it came to bringing Jules to life, Levinson recounted that after Hunter Schafer read for the role, the two sat and talked about their lives and experiences for several hours. Levinson was so inspired by what Schafer could bring to Jules that after the conversation, he went home and immediately started writing. Hunter Schafer also credited Levinson with being an amazing listener and having lots of time to share our stories with each other and make Jules really dimensional and deep. As the series progressed, Hunter even co-wrote Jules' special episode with Levinson, which featured Jules in an hour-long therapy session. The episode was positively received for its character development and emotional depth, but a common critique of the show's second season is that its shallowness is shrouded in style, and Levinson, along with his non-existent writer's room, is to blame. Still, season 2 of Euphoria has drawn more eyes than ever before. Its premiere approached 19 million viewers in the United States alone, and it's now the most tweeted about show of the decade so far in the US, with 34 million tweets. It's no wonder that discourse surrounding the show has become its own unique genre of content. So let's dive into some discourse on discourse. Discourse about film and TV have been around as long as the mediums themselves, in the form of film and television critics. I don't think TV show discourse should be conflated with criticism, but to the chagrin of true critics, they do feel like they're in the same family. People discussing the merit of a piece of media. Criticism has an air of legitimacy to it, while discourse seems relegated to the masses, but social media has given everyone a voice and blurred the line between a refined critic and mere audience member. Euphoria discourse is, as writer Jacob Safarian put it, inescapable, incessant debate about whether the depiction of teen sex and drug use is accurate. Twitter provides weekly recaps and even familiarizes non-viewers with the Euphoria world through a steady assault of screenshots turned memes. For 8 weeks, from January 9th to February 27th, 2022, Euphoria discourse has plagued the feeds of 18 to 34-year-olds. The show, with its sensational nudity and TikTok-ready sound bites, is a recipe for virality. Everything from the show's plot lines to on-set drama to debunked conspiracies to the nail art is down for analysis, deconstruction, or dispute. But if for some reason your feed has had a Euphoria-shaped hole in it for the past couple of months, here's the most talked about discourse you've missed. Per usual, one of the biggest problems people have with Euphoria is the gratuitous nudity. HBO is known for being anything but prudish. However, for a show about high schoolers, not necessarily for them, it's excessive to say the least. In a recent interview with Independent, actress Sydney Sweeney, who portrays Cassie, discussed her frustration with how her work is received when it involves nudity, citing that critics don't talk about the merit of her performance when she appears naked, so it's natural that she'd want to tone it down at times. She said, "There are moments where Cassie was supposed to be shirtless, and I would tell Sam, I don't really think that's necessary here. He was like, okay, you don't need it. I've never felt like Sam has pushed it on me or was trying to get a nude scene into an HBO show. Sweeney emphasized that she never felt uncomfortable filming nude scenes on the Euphoria set, thanks to a great intimacy coordinator and clear communication from her castmates and the crew. However, the interview reignited the discourse about undue nudity in a show that's supposed to be about minors. A similar fervor erupted when it was rumored that most of Kat's scenes were cut from this season because actress Barbie Ferreira didn't like the storyline Levinson wrote for her character. People were also confused and enraged when McKay, the only black male character on the show, played by Algie Smith, was basically written off the season with no explanation. And these are just the highlights of the discourse of this season. While questions and critiques about a show's intention and impact are valid, it's kind of strange how much people love watching Euphoria while hating its creator. I wouldn't even call it hate watching because most of these people genuinely enjoyed watching Euphoria at some points or some point in time, but didn't like the turn this season has taken. And honestly, I didn't really love this season of Euphoria either. I think like a couple episodes really stood out and were really great, but overall I felt like not much happened. Of course, Euphoria can't and won't be everything for everyone all at once, which is precisely what makes it such fertile ground for the myriad of discourse surrounding it. And while the discourse can be annoying, overbearing, or downright dumb, isn't there a certain joy to be had in everyone tuning in at the same time on Sunday nights? In the golden age of content, where niching down is the new norm, it's kind of exciting to revel in the camaraderie that monoculture affords us. If you run out of things to talk about with an acquaintance, there is always the new episode of Euphoria, or Twitter discourse to discuss, or a YouTube video featuring a college student talking about the meta-narrative of Euphoria to watch. That one sounds particularly interesting. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts below, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!